Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey.
Got that traditional one more minute.
We usually kick out the fireflies.ai guy.
All right.
That's the CNCF recommendation. Anyways,
And
thank you.
all right. Well, it's 3 after, so let's get started. Welcome to the Tuesday, May 20th, 2025 SIG MC meetup. Um, as is our new process, let's start with a scrub. Let me just pull up the right screen here. All right. So kind of picking up where we left off last week. Um, we had a follow-up on uh, on chat to just confirm that this was in fact the correct service import PR to review. It looks like it is. So I was hoping Bobby would join early today so that we could talk about the review committee because he had an agenda. Looks like we have a few people volunteering already. But perhaps we could follow up with this. I think giving this a review so we can get this in, and then
Actually, it's still blocked, but I will try to do a presentation next week on current status and next step.
okay, so this is blocked on your feedback. That's the
Well, consensus on. Well, we have consensus on that we should mirror the field and avoid at all cost webhooks. Well,
Mhm.
but we don't have like clear consensus on what exactly we should do as a modification and in what version it should go.
Okay. Sounds good. Can I appoint you responsible for just adding a status update to this PR so that we can have that
Yeah,
tracked?
the last week's status update should be correct. It's
Um, right. Okay.
But yeah, just if you are interested in MCC API and this change, try to tune in next week, basically.
Sounds good. So that's that one. And the alpha beta graduation is still blocked on that. The dual stack policies. So yeah, this one makes sense to me. I think we had the general philosophy with the MCS API when it came to dual stack was to just do what service was doing. So I'll give this a review and probably merge unless anybody objects in the next couple days. But our default should be copy service, in my opinion. So this one seems not super controversial. see, where did we get to with this one? So yeah, this is where I wanted to bring Bobby in. We have a few reviews, adding some additional property, the well-known properties, and placement decision API. I was thinking that these could be a really good uh, way to try out this committee. Corrington, I see you on here. Have you talked to Bobby at all about this? I don't know if maybe you.
The comedy, I know I've put my name in the hat as well, but I
Yeah.
don't know if he's picked people or how he wants to pick people or what was the idea for that, to be honest. I don't have the results also from the form.
Okay.
So I don't know if you, did he publish the results? Is the
He
form
has
for review
not
access?
yet. He said that he's got 7 people so far. I'm basically just reading the notes at this point. He's got 7 people so far, asking that folks sign up. The form is in the agenda. Sign up basically by end of day today. Um, Whatever time zone you're in, but I think we'll probably look at it tomorrow. Steven's out right now anyway, so we'll have to coordinate offline. But please consider today the motivating day to sign up if you're interested in being part of this review committee. And yeah, we'll try to get that going. And I think we've got a few changes in the scrub that are a good way to test this out. And then hopefully next week we can regroup with some progress. All right. So with that, I think kind of continuing the scrub, and I moved it off. Arthur, since you had a formal agenda item for one of the things in the one of the scrub items, let's go to you.
Yes. So I was kind of surprised last week's scrub because last time we talked about this before, to me, it seems that everyone was kind of okay, but it might be why I didn't receive reviews. But yeah, so this PR is adding like an annotation to mark DRI services if the implementation is using that. And it's already somewhat done in like an example controller inside the MCS API repo. But yeah, I was wondering if we could make it slightly more official than this semi-official MCS API repo things. I don't have. I'm fine not being official. I think it's clear in our doc that we require this if you want to use Cilium Gateway API with any other MCS API implementations. It could be sufficient from this like Cilium project point of view. So yeah, I'm not attached to anything, but I don't think it restricts that much implementations.
Right. So I think maybe I was the voice here, so I'll kind of reshare my thoughts. Like we do follow this pattern in GK as well. Like I think the pattern makes a lot of sense. My concern with making the annotation official is that I expect that will effectively make this a requirement. You're just going to end up with a situation where people assume that this exists, and if it doesn't exist, then things that build on MCS won't work. And it's okay if something that builds on MCS doesn't work without this functionality. But that as a decision of the component builder. But if we formalize this, it sort of, I just don't see a way to add this as a should that won't end up being breaking in strange and interesting ways down the line. So
Just the should is conditioned by the fact that the implementation is using your shadow services, but I understand the point.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, like if you're using shadow services, you should add this, but then that means that you like what do we gain from doing that, right? Because we already have a way to reference to tie endpoints to the service import, and that ideally would be the way that anyone who's building on top of this connects to services. if a certain controller wants to use this as a shortcut, that's completely fine. But if we formalize the way that the controller uses the derived service shortcut, then I expect many other controllers will start relying on that. And then it effectively becomes part of the spec. So, and maybe, and please, anyone push back if you think I'm going too far with this, but the way that I kind of see it is, if we're going to add this to the spec, it should just be like, maybe we're changing MCS to require derived services, and that's a bigger leap. Otherwise, my bias has been to leave things like this out of the spec, but welcome it. Like, by all means, this is a fine way to solve the problem. Just don't formalize it so that folks building components on top of MCS aren't forced to rely on this functionality or implement things twice.
No, I think it's fair. I mean, it's our stand is less clear in our Cilium doc, so it's fine to not be picking up this. I will comment and close the PR then.
Okay, awesome. And if it becomes an issue, we should, I'm all for reopening this, but let's reopen it under the, under the standpoint of trying to formalize this as a, like, just considering the downstream effects, I guess.
Well, as you said, I guess it would require like enforcing derived services implementation probably. Or at least that, I don't know, there is a like there is a way with services and there is a way with not services, and well, they in implementation still create a service no matter what, even if it's still not used, or I don't know, whatever. Well, anyway, I will close this.
Okay, awesome. Well, Bobby, I see that you joined. I bumped you up to the top because I think your topic relates to the scrub, but I was curious if you wanted to give an update on
Sure.
on the review committee.
Yeah. So, thank you. First of all, thank you very much for those who have shown interest. As of yesterday, we had 7 candidates. I didn't check actually today. Maybe we have even more now. I believe from the beginning, we thought that maybe 4 to 5 people would be great for the committee. And I still think that maybe 5, and given that we have a little bit larger number of volunteers so far, maybe 5 people would be ideal in this case, and probably odd numbers are better in case there is disagreement or something. So maybe we choose 5 people. I will take a look at the final nominees or volunteers, and then I'll pass the information to you folks, Jeremy and Stefan. I think you guys can go ahead and decide which people you want to choose from the pool, and we will go from there. And one more time, I want to emphasize on the fact that this group is supposed to review PRs on a timely fashion, and make sure that no PRs remain silenced for more than a few business days, and so forth. But it does not mean that other people are not supposed to review. Of course, you're more than welcome to review, even maybe if you have serious objections. Of course, maybe you can even block some PRs if there is a major concern, etc. But this group, if they approve a PR and if other people are silenced or are in agreement, then SIG leads will go ahead and approve the PRs and merge them. That's the update. Is there any question, by the way, about the approach?
Bobby, should we say also that this group will likely not be set in stone, and we'll give a chance to update and all that, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is a given, I guess. We are all humans. Our life priorities change, or sometimes our jobs change, etc. So definitely, this group is not set in stone, and we will go through the review process of evaluating the committee members, etc., and replacing them if they choose not to act anymore.
I think per Mike's comment, like making it a rotation kind of makes sense. I think you had a duration in mind, Bobby, before.
I didn't think about a particular duration before, but that's a good idea. Maybe we can, I don't know, maybe we can go with like a a year or so. And of course, this does not still mean that people are going to stay there for a whole year. Sometimes people may not want to continue.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good. I guess maybe we say a year or maybe a couple quarters or something, but please do also let us know if you don't want to participate anymore for whatever reason. I think that would just a horrible heads up versus a versus silent exit. Cool. Yeah, thanks, Bobby. We'll connect. I guess tomorrow or later in the week. Stephen's out.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Okay, Corentin, I think you are up next.
Yes. Sorry. So we talked a lot, quite a bit about placement decision last time. And I reviewed the PR. I think the CAP does a lot of very interesting things, and I wanted to push this a little bit further because finally the CRD looks a lot like ours. Ours. Sorry, what we have in MCO that we want to open source and have everyone on it. That should be ours, but I definitely wanted to share some thoughts on scheduling, on the approaches, and how I've been thinking about it, and see if that resonates with people. Jeremy, could you give me a presentation, please? I got a
So is it
couple
not
slides
working?
up.
You should have it.
You disabled attendee screen sharing. I can quit and come back maybe, otherwise you tell me.
No. Does it work now?
Oh yeah, I got it now. Perfect.
Okay. Yeah, it's a fun thing when you're a host. It's already checked to allow everybody to share, but you have to actually switch it off and back for it to.
Double check it. Yeah. It's level based, right? No, not level, but edge based. Anyway, so here's a couple slides. So we've been thinking about scheduling quite a bit for MCO, and I know a lot of you have as well, whether it's via Karmata or Qplete or I think OCM also might have one. But yeah, so it's like schedules are like opinions, right? We all got one. That's really that, and that's what we're trying to align. But one of the thing I realized is we were often confused or mixing, like sometimes with scheduling a work, which is a nebulous thing, or potentially a grouping of pods, potentially a single one. It's not necessarily clear. And sometimes we're talking about scheduling pods directly. And obviously at the risk of fighting with the pod scheduler on the remote cluster, right? So pod is often the most natural and what people think about, but there's definitely a few problems with pod scheduling because one, you're fighting with the remote scheduler, and also, well, you're a single point of failure because now you're a central scheduler. So there's like some approaches, there's some ways you could do it for sure, but so that's why I'm kind of like splitting them into two. On one side, I think where sometimes you want to have a scheduler that deals with scheduling kind of globally and have this global view of scheduling. And sometimes you want a scheduler that takes one item, that being a pod or work or something, but then schedules it to a cluster. And it's like a more traditional Kubernetes in that sense, where in Kubernetes there are controllers that creates pods. The pods get scheduled on the node, and everyone's happy, right? But I'm wondering if that model of being more global, a global view of the system helps. And that's something we've done for MCO, where when we have this global view where we react to a cluster being unable to scale and we decide to get on another cluster, which is something you would need maybe an equivalent of an autoscaler like the HPA, but for clusters to do. And now it's like it becomes a lot of things. But if you're talking also about topology, oh, I want 3 clusters per continent, you kind of want that global view to be able to realize, oh, I need, I got 3 continents, or I need 9 clusters distributed, and here are the clusters that I'll pick. And picking the cluster and decided number of clusters sometimes kind of go hand in hand. So that's why having that global view can be relevant sometime. So kind of thinking about like those two approaches. And I know we tend, when we do things, to design everything like Kubernetes, but I'm kind of like, oh, maybe what if we took a slightly different approach here? And Kubernetes is hard because a lot of things re-implement some scheduler logic. Like I think like descheduler kind of re-implements some of the scheduler logic to figure out, okay, will I be able to bin pack and schedule if I deschedule this thing, right? So there's a bunch of things where the Kubernetes model sometimes makes things harder for us. So think about that. And that kind of goes, okay, if we were to look at the two models, obviously on the right side is if you were to do a single work at a time, it's like you find eligible clusters, then you find the currently scheduled replica if you want to apply spreading or affinity, and then you assign, and then whatever syncer and all that may do some configuration, then you syncing. That could be one way to do it. Every time you got a work item, you schedule it, now you apply it and you go. Very Kubernetes easy in terms of how it works. The other side is more, I think, the approach we're talking more about a global scheduler that sees the entirety of the workload across multiple clusters, where it finds eligible clusters, but there's that scaling aspect. It's like, how many do we need? And there's also that placing on like, oh, if we need to move out of one cluster and to a cluster, maybe we need to give that signal to the syncer that will be. And so that's kind of like the extra logic that our scheduler has. It's almost, you could think about it as a built-in autoscaler, or there's some aspect of the controller that also would be built in thanks to that. And the last part also is I've been fighting a lot of those things. Works very well when you have an HPA, but as soon as you're trying to size a global workload, is like you're starting to talk into a number of replicas, and I've been thinking like, oh, maybe there's a part where actual sizing of each one of the work item would likely be something you'd want after that, and then you pipe everything in the syncer. So it's like slightly different thing, and thinking we could focus on that global scheduler. Global view of workload is usually how people think about it, I think, where either they want, yeah, they kind of want to see and think about it more globally, and so one by one, because then they have also that subdivision by pod when it reaches the cluster. So there's that aspect, and I think that fits with the with whatever the placement decision has. So it's like a state of, yeah, sorry, what did I flip them? Anyway, state is really like their list of clusters for a given request. And that's what we've been doing for MCO and all that. So I was thinking, it's like, hey, could we use the CRD we have, and could we open source that and make that the central thing? Instead of having a placement decision, we could just have a placement maybe. And maybe we have this spec and we could formalize the spec, and we've done some things. And what I'll totally admit, we're missing a ton of things, but we could make things pluggable, and we could all contribute rules and make that into a separate project. I mean, the whole placement could be in its own project. I mean, we don't mean to own it. It should be an OSS thing. And so there's a lot of things we want to add, but I wonder if that structure of that I showed maybe in here that we're kind of following and applying, where you could plug rules everywhere, could be the thing we want to do. So that's just an idea. And I think there's a state diagram around cluster for how do you pick which cluster should be added and removed, because like all those transition is really a state diagram of cluster. And that I wonder if it's specific to us or if it's something that we should standardize as well. So some idea, I don't know. I'm happy to hear more and talk more with folks interested in scheduling things. Let me know. I'll stop talking. Sorry, there's quite a bit of things.
Mike,
Oh,
thank you.
Yep. So I read this proposal. I mean, it's really interesting, and I agree with a lot of things in this proposal. But the thing that mentioned the placement decision, I feel is a little bit off, because placement decision does not have the scheduling capability, right? It's just like you say, you call it the state, but we call it more like an outcome, the results of the placement, right? So I don't think it overlaps with whatever you're proposing here at all, because the decision, which I still feel like it should be a slice, because that's how we're gonna be able to handle like a large amount of results, right? And I mean, so unless you make this placement as a slice as well, which is kind of so the decision I feel like will always have a place. And does the consumer does the consumer of the placement, I guess the consumer, do they really need to know the spec as well? How should I say it? Like maybe they're not in the business of scheduling, like the consumer of the scheduling results. Maybe they just want to know, give me the results and then I'll use it, that type of thing.
I mean, the spec is for the person that wants something to be scheduled. It's a way to give requirements, right, on scheduling. And then the state is the outcome of those scheduling decisions. And then obviously the thing that syncs just abides by the scheduling decision, right? So that's why those don't care about the spec for sure. Yeah.
So that's why I feel like that decoupling of having both, it's not a bad idea as well.
I think that's true for any controller when you think about it, right? It's like layering, right? It's always the one that cares about the state and ignores the spec, and one that writes the spec and will not leverage the state, or maybe will read it to see if it happened properly and all that. But I don't think, I'm not sure like ignoring the spec doesn't mean there shouldn't be a spec.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
there's that. I have, and I'll move to other hands unless you have more. But one thing I was thinking as an alternative as well, it could be, instead of forcing a single CRD, maybe for the placement decision, we could say that the state of a placement CRD has to follow a certain pattern. And we could say that the consumers of a placement decision should just be provided the kind as well, and it should be dynamic to read, any kind for scheduling. So effectively making an interface out of CRDs, and that's something we've been seeing in one of our thing where we support like work API or another format. Like we support config map and work API, for example, and we ask the user to pass us the kind and the path, and then we read everything in there. That could be an approach, so we could have multiple CRDs follow the same placement decision format. That's also an option. I haven't put that in the slides, but it's something I'll try to explore as well if we don't go on a single CRD. Jeremy, I think you were second. So, and thanks, man.
Actually, I'll let Bobby go first.
All right.
Yeah, I actually wanted to touch a little bit on the global versus kind of like local or single cluster decision first. I think that is crucial in my opinion. It, of course, global makes it a little bit more complex, but at the same time, it opens up some possibilities for placement and placement decisions and opportunities for optimal placement among multiple clusters that wouldn't be possible without it. So I think global is inevitable in my opinion if we really want to have proper multi-cluster scheduling examples, or one cluster runs out of capacity, and you want to place workloads on another cluster and so on. So that's one thing. And then Quarantine, on your last point, I think yes, we definitely need to have support for all other CRDs and other resources in addition to deployments and workloads as well. Yeah, that's all.
Related question: how do we think about it with this global approach? How do we think about scale and performance? Oh, Corton, you muted.
Thank you. Do you mean by scale? Do you mean scheduling on more clusters?
Yeah. Like whenever we try to do any kind of global views into anything, we start to basically adopt single cluster limits in some dimension. Right.
What do you mean by single cluster limits? As in like a single point of failure for it, or?
Amount of update frequency, like in all dimensions.
Because we're doing that locally.
Right. Like if the goal is purely about like finding and being able to run stuff in multiple locations, but it's not about increasing scale over current limitations, then it's not a huge concern. But basically, whenever we try to do rollups of anything, we bring single cluster constraints into the multi-cluster world. And so I think it's really important thing to think about, especially because we know that these days everybody's having their limits of the Kubernetes cluster stretched.
So I think, I can maybe touch a little bit on that. I think, Jeremy, that's a great point. There are alternatives to watching everything in multiple clusters. When it comes to scheduling workloads, for example, one of the alternatives is to use metrics instead of just watching all the resources in every cluster. Part of the reason that allows us to do so is that sometimes when it comes to scheduling workloads in multiple clusters, you don't need to have, it's ideal, but you don't need to have very real-time information. Sometimes it's okay, and we can afford having like even minutes of latency in making another decision. So that that allows us to have like alternative approaches such as metrics and so on that makes us be a lot more scalable.
So I completely agree with that, and that's why I said both scale and performance, because you pick one in this case, right? Or
well, I mean, acceptable performance, but not super real-time performance.
Right.
And in fact, even if we could react very quickly, oftentimes in multi-cluster environments, the eventual results are not very immediate. So
exactly.
It's
so
pointless.
So you said it right there. It's acceptable performance. But what I don't think we've done is actually, or at least I haven't seen it. So forgive me if we have properly defined what we consider acceptable performance. Because basically, in certain approaches, if we're saying like it might be a couple minutes out of date or seconds or whatever that acceptable drift is, we should define that so that because that opens up a lot of doors. Like relying on metrics propagation is probably not going to work if you're looking for near real-time accuracy. If you're okay with potential couple minutes drift, then that's probably fine in a lot of implementations. So we should define that, because that's going to drive a lot here. And the difference between real-time global updates to something and eventually consistent over minutes global updates to something is massive.
Right. And two, there's a question from Ilya also on what is the unit of scheduling workload representation? Is it a pod? And one thing I think that goes to that point is the unit of scheduling for us has been like a deployment. So you'd schedule a bunch of deployment, one per cluster. So when Bobby's talking about metrics, also that should be one metric for the entire set of pods. So we're trying to, there would be also that consolidation. So ideally there should be an HPA, and it would be as dependent on the global, but right.
But so that's a great point too. Let's dig in there, because even if we just care about one resource, if the resource is updated every time the pod is updated, it doesn't solve that frequency problem.
It's different. I think and there's different. What I'm hoping is that we could standardize, and depending on what you're doing and what you're actually scheduling, you might have different requirements. That's also could be some of the problems. And if you're scheduling deployments and your clusters are very independent, once you've scheduled them, let's say the HPAs and all that, maybe you don't care about that performance that you have at the multi-cluster layer. It's true that if you're scheduling pods, then then you care definitely a lot more, right? And it gets a lot more complicated. And that's the part where I think it's scary, like to have a standard. Obviously, it's like, can we fit everyone in there? And that I don't know, honestly.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, for me, the biggest thing is just defining these variables more than any direction on the approach, because I think that's the signal of viability.
So, Jeremy, quick question: doesn't it? I mean, I don't know, maybe in a ideal world, you could potentially watch everything globally in real time too. Should we actually define those kind of like SLO, SLAs here in the design, or should we leave that to implementations and the offerings of each cloud providers? Here, I think we could potentially pick the approach. And setting some expectations, sure, I understand that, but defining those more precisely is really implementation dependent, I would say.
I think anybody can be more precise than a spec. My concern is like, why do we want to? Why is this an important thing for this community to drive? And it's because we want to enable folks to build on it as a tool. And so we need to outline the set of assumptions that folks building on this spec can make. If we say that it needs to be updated within minutes and blah 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 in the community, and somebody goes ahead and build an actual real-time implementation, that's completely fine, and tools can adjust and all that. But I think if I'm building a tool that I want anybody who's using this API to be able to deploy anywhere, then the difference between real-time and eventually consistent as an assumption that a tool builder can make, I think is kind of important.
Yeah, certainly. I agree with setting the expectations here and leaving maybe the precise definitions up to the implementations, right? So I agree with that.
And Jeremy, on the approach, sorry, Ryan, I'll give you that. Do you have any thoughts on the global versus like more per work type of thing? I don't know, is it because they're very different? There's almost like an architectural decision, and I feel that the performance you're looking for and the scale you're looking for might be specific of what they're actually doing after that. So I'm kind of curious on your thoughts on this.
I mean, I tend to bias towards finer grained when possible, but that's kind of why I wanted to lead with laying out the assumptions, because it is a bias, and it's not something that I've really thought about in this case to apply directly. But I think if we lay out the assumptions they can make, at least for me, that would help evaluate the proposal a little bit better.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, thank you. Just touched upon a few things. I think one thing Jeremy mentioned, why is this community want to do this API or something like that? I think one of the main reason for me is that we observe that in this community, everybody is doing something similar, but not same. So everybody's reinvent their wheel. Maybe that's one of the reasons I feel like we should, as a community, as a SIG, we would like to try to unify this so everybody can. And I heard complaints from the community that they cannot find anything that is kind of SIG endorsed, so they are kind of forced to do their own thing. So that's one thing I feel like it could be really improve this the ecosystem, so that we can have a more concrete building platform, so everybody can build on top of that. Another thing, actually, I was curious because in my vision that this is not just API. This actually does come with a functional implementation. It's kind of like probably a taboo. It's kind of like could be Fed v3. Hopefully it ends up better than that. Because just with this API, if everybody just implement this API, it's still much better than what we have now. But still, we are not, at least from my point of view, it didn't achieve what the potential is. The potential is that this is the building block, and everybody can build on top of that. At least for a lot of like the Bloomberg. I think Clay is here. I don't know if Clay's here. Things like that. Lots of in the community that they are looking for something that they can build on top. So I don't know if that's something aligned with this idea. And then one last thing is, I assume this will be more discussed in this committee or whatever Bobby's what that is called. I forget, like that 5 people thing. I don't know if that my assumption is correct.
So the last part of the question was that the 5. What was the question about the?
Like, is this because is this the more discussions of this API, and then maybe some implementation will be discussed in that committee?
I think actually that it's a great starting point for the committee, maybe to start with the API, and yes, I think it's a good example for sure.
Yeah, Mike, I see your hand.
Yeah, I mean, I want to echo your thoughts on, I think what you were referring to, kind of like just having the API might not be enough. We might need kind of like a reference implementation. And Cortine, I don't know if you have any comment on that. Yeah, just basically what Ryan said.
On reference implementation, I mean, this is definitely something we're doing at MCO. So we would love to just put that in the open and have everyone be on the same plane. If we can donate that, we're really happy with that. If that's what we want to follow, yeah. I mean, it's open source anyway, so we'll
exactly.
put it out there and we'll continue on that. If we're aligning on a similar pattern and contributing all to the same source, that'll be great. That's what I would say. And maybe it doesn't have to. One possibility too is that it's not necessarily the way the SIG recommends, but if a few of us are working on some common goals and common project, that's still, I think, potentially good for the community if there's if we're solving actual use cases. I mean, that's always the problem, right? Always solving actual problems, and we want people want to use it.
Right, so
Yeah.
you know the placement spec. I think even your presentation mentioned there is missing quite a few things. So I feel like the community can build, you know, that common API together, and then we can have maybe not the implementation. We'll have kind of like a reference implementation to some of that fields. Ryan, does that answer your question? I feel like that would
Actually,
be something more useful.
I'm not 100% sure the terminology, what the reference implementation means. My experience was it's not the real implementation that is not really usable. But again, the community wants something right out of the box that actually is working. Like again, think of Kubernetes, right? It's not the API wings. It's that the implementation actually wings. If you have a Kubernetes API this complicated, I doubt anybody can implement that and adopt that. Again, from my perspective, I feel like something that actually is working is what the community is looking for. A lot of because we know pretty much everyone who is doing those currently need some kind of multi-cluster scheduling capabilities, and they are forced to build their own stuff, write some script, do some hatch patch stuff. If they are small company, if they're bigger companies, they just we've both seen people put like 20 people team doing their own thing. I've seen a few of them already. So yeah. So hopefully we don't need, not everyone needs to do that. Yeah, Bobby.
So yes, I agree with those. And also I wanted to add that if Corentin says that, you know, let's use this particular CRD from MCO, etc., doesn't mean that let's take MCO and call it the final implementation of what we are exactly looking for. MCO is not complete for sure. It needs a lot of other contribution and also other features. That's definitely the case. We want to bring a lot of other contributions from maybe Ryan. You guys have built some systems that we would love to have parts of those in the community as well. So definitely we should bring those in, and we should make it complete. It's just, you know, MCO is also, it's in infancy. It's just the beginning. Definitely that's the case. That's one. The second thing regarding the reference implementation, you're right, Ryan. I think what we call it reference implementation is not just like a non-working example. It should be a working example that can be taken and used even in prod systems. That's what I also believe in. What I wanted to add is that we should, like, you know, Kubernetes itself, like the scheduler of Kubernetes, we should make it so that people can also take it and replace it with something else, or maybe expand it. Maybe, you know, we can use the same like idea like the scheduling framework, so that people can build their own additional capabilities into the scheduler. That's what we call reference here, but otherwise it should be fully working. I don't know who's next. I guess Clay, maybe you're next.
Yeah, I one thought that wanted to bring up is the both of these kind of options assume you want automatic placement. And I am not, I focus on our multi-cluster metadata management, authentication, things like that, not as much scheduling at Bloomberg. but we do tend to really like deterministic placement. So one thing just to call out as the SIG solidifies kind of what directions make sense, it may be worth just also remembering that not everyone wants automatic placement, which if I'm understanding right, both of these proposals kind of assume. So just wanted to point out.
I agree. I mean, if it is only one-to-one, maybe, we should provide or one to specific set of clusters, we should always provide things like label selectors, etc. Like similar to what scheduler of Kubernetes has for nodes, we can have here for clusters. The automatic part is, in case you choose to use that feature, then you can have it.
Yep. Yeah, I think it doesn't really hopefully affect this design too much, but just to remember that there's kind of the third option out there some folks may follow.
Yeah. No, I mean, if we are able to place workloads on multiple clusters and so on, and we can do it also automatically, picking the best cluster, just choosing clusters in a more static way, and like a fixed cluster, etc., is a simpler, subset of that problem. Joshua.
Hey, I was just going to sort of circle back and just sort of sitting here listening to all of this. Like, I'm going to re-echo that. To me, it's kind of separate from the placement decision. My take was that the placement decision was our choice as a community to sort of come up with a guaranteed outcome for the list of clusters. In this case, we're looking at the picture, the global list that we were going to have, and whether that's fed by an MCO style placement and that we can make the reference, or it's Karmada's propagation policy, or somebody builds a third thing. I would actually argue that if more of the other communities, if everybody adopts the outcome and contributes as references their placement styled schedulers, it gives somebody programming with our API for the cluster an opportunity to choose what is, just like Clay was saying, they look at it a little differently with the static, to choose an implementation of what they actually, what they need specifically, because we're not going to build one that does them all, or if we do, it's going to turn into a monolith anyways. And so, you can pick which ones you want, which of the references, and I use the word plurally there, you want, but expect the same style output of these are my clusters. And so your software may do one thing one day with one placement and something different you change over time with another.
So I would, my counter argument to that is that only very expert people can pick the right platform. I think, just imagine the schedule and Kubernetes itself, if we had like 5 schedulers and we didn't choose any one, people would have had a hard time picking the right scheduler for them. And I'm pretty sure whatever we choose, there will be, whatever systems we decide to build, there will be a lot of overlap between the scheduling capabilities of these different components, right? So it's going to be very hard. In fact, a lot of users, one of the common complaints about Kubernetes even today is that it's very complicated and it has a pretty sharp learning curve. Add to that just all the details of like multi-cluster schedulers, which are, to be honest with you, they are actually complex components for someone, like myself, who has been in this business for many years. So I think we should probably, as a SIG, we should probably get together and build one complete solution, I would say, which covers almost all the capabilities that are, not all, but most common capabilities. But of course, people can choose other systems if they have a compatible API. We are not going to prevent people from building other components themselves. Like in Kubernetes itself, people can choose a different scheduler. That's my opinion about this.
I guess my counter to your counter is that, if it is just one option, though, you're going, either you have to say yes to everybody, or you're going to end up with a bunch of forks and people are going to go off and do it anyways, because you're not going to cover, you know, my choice, and sorry, Clay, I'm going to use your name, but or Clay's choice, or, you know, or somebody else wants to do, which I guess is, you know, they're free to do. But then if that code starts to pick up and lots of people start to use it, we get the question of, well, why didn't we do it, versus accepting, you know, accepting others. And again, I'm just after listening for 30 minutes, it was just sort of what was percolating in my head, is that it's sort of the solve for one always sounds great, but it's sometimes more difficult to execute on. That's all.
Yeah, I understand your point. Yeah.
Yeah, and echo what Joshua says too is we fully understand how hard this is. Look at Kubernetes, how complicated Kubernetes is. I always had a theory that it has to be complicated, because if it's not that complicated, it cannot cover all the cases. So yeah, that's where I think the committee would work. Let's see if it's possible. If we end up, to be honest, if it's end up we look at this whole problem is just not possible at all after a few rounds. I agree that we at least have this scheduling decision somewhat can unify the community better than not. But I also agree with Bobby that if we could somehow have a unified scheduling implementation, that'd be definitely, to me, it's much better. But I agree, it's hard. We need to see if we can, as the SIG, whether we can actually get to that point. That's the goal, but I'm not sure if it is doable.
I think one kind of middle ground that we kind of implemented in Kubernetes itself was to build the system so that it's very much pluggable. So it has like some core components, and then all these other capabilities can be added to the core. Like, you know, there is a framework in the Kubernetes scheduler, for example, there is a framework, and then there are a lot of these pluggable points, right? So you can, you know, add more scoring functions for node, more filtering functions, more like binding functions, more even queue sort functions, etc. And then the framework chooses those. I think something like that may be a middle ground solution here that covers maybe all use cases. And, you know, if we build that core, then other people who have other use cases, they can build plugins for it.
Since everyone's going quiet, let's move on topic. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Maybe because there's a couple, we got 5 minutes, and I think there were a couple other things in there.
Yeah, I think, Arthur, you were next, and I'm sorry that we went so long on that, but I think it was a really good discussion.
Yeah, my point is super quick update. As you might know, I had this project of bringing MCS API support in like Coordinates main repo, Coordinates by default, and it was merged yesterday. So in the next Coordinates release, you will be able to use it, and it will get included in Kubernetes release 2 when it will pick up.
Awesome.
And that's
awesome.
the news.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing.
That's good.
And with that, 4 minutes left. Is that Priya? I'm sorry we don't have a lot of time. Optionally, we could also just bump this to next week.
Yeah, sure,
and,
of course. Yeah, no worries.
And then we'll make you first.
Yeah, sure.
So, okay, yeah, I don't think 4 minutes is enough time for much discussion. Anything else quick for the last couple of minutes?
I can give 2 updates in the question. One is on the management cluster. Carmeta joined their meeting last time, and I think they want to survey their own community, and kind of, so I'm a little waiting on their situation. I think just to fully validate on the hub cluster, the management cluster thing. I'll send that back to you, Jeremy, once I get the decision. And then working on the KEP for credentials that should come out soon, but getting if anyone wants to contribute, I'd love that. And I'm looking at the exec provider in kubeconfig right now, if that's tickles anyone's interest. I think that's it.
Awesome. Sounds good. So one last quick thing, Jeremy, I have your email address, of course, but I need Stefan's email address as well to share the results of the forum with you all.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah. Well, let's follow up after.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I think a lot of really good discussion today, and some good AIs. And next week should be interesting with the start of this committee.
Sounds good. Thank you all.
Happy Tuesday.
Thank you. Bye bye.